Rainwater dripped steadily from the rusted edge of the diner's corrugated roof, striking the cracked asphalt below with a rhythm that almost sounded deliberate. Inside, beneath flickering fluorescent lights that hummed with age, a lone man pushed a heavy mop across worn black and white floor tiles dulled by decades of grease and forgotten conversations. The air carried the sharp scent of industrial cleaner mixed with old coffee trapped in stained wooden counters. Outside, headlights swept briefly across the fogged windows before disappearing into the gray dawn. No one passing that lonely roadside diner would have guessed that the quiet man polishing its forgotten floors had once sat across polished boardroom tables where billion-dollar decisions were made. And no one, not yet, could have answered the question that would quietly shape every moment to come: why had a man like Ethan Brooks willingly disappeared from a world that once knew his name? Ethan paused only long enough to straighten his aching back. His denim work shirt was faded from years of washing, the sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms despite the morning chill. Every movement carried an unhurried precision, as though routine itself had become a form of discipline. The diner was barely more than a neglected shell when he purchased it 3 weeks earlier. The windows leaked cold air. Half the kitchen equipment barely functioned. One booth leaned crookedly because someone had repaired it with mismatched screws years ago. Most people had called it a terrible investment. To Ethan, it looked like another chance. He reached into his pocket and unfolded a small photograph already softened by time. 11-year-old Lily smiled into the camera, missing one front tooth, her brown hair tangled by the wind during a county fair they could barely afford. Someone had painted a butterfly on her cheek. She had insisted they spend their last $20 on cotton candy instead of carnival rides because, in her words, memories last longer than tickets. The memory still made him smile. He slipped the photograph back into his wallet before anyone could see. Not that anyone was there. Silence filled the empty diner except for the steady squeak of rubber soles against tile, and the distant rumble of trucks moving along the highway outside. Dust floated through pale shafts of morning light filtering between old blinds. Every chair Ethan repaired, every light bulb he replaced, every inch of chipped paint he carefully covered carried the same quiet promise. He wasn't trying to rebuild a business. He was rebuilding a life. At precisely 7:30, the front bell jingled. Lily stepped inside wearing an oversized school hoodie, her backpack nearly as large as she was. Cold autumn air followed her through the doorway. "It already smells better," she said with a grin. Ethan looked up from tightening a loose table leg. "It smells like bleach. It smells like hope." He laughed softly. "That's a strange thing to smell." She shrugged. "You always say clean places make people believe tomorrow will be better." He blinked for a moment. He had forgotten saying that. Children remembered everything that mattered. Lily unpacked 2 paper cups of hot chocolate from a small carrier. "I traded my allowance for breakfast." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." They sat together inside the empty diner while dawn slowly brightened the windows. Steam curled upward from the cups, carrying the sweet scent of chocolate through the cool room. Either of them spoke much. They didn't need to. After years of surviving disappointment together, silence had become another language. Soon the school bus arrived. Before climbing aboard, Lily hugged him tightly. "You'll make this place beautiful." "I'll try." "No," she corrected gently. "You always do." She disappeared onto the bus, leaving Ethan standing alone beneath the gray sky. He watched until the bus vanished around the bend. Then he returned to work. 3 hours later, a white delivery van pulled into the parking lot. The driver climbed out carrying several catalogs. "You Ethan Brooks?" "I am." "I'm Martin. Regional food supplier." They shook hands. Martin looked around skeptically. "You really bought this place?" "I did." "You've got courage." "Or bad timing." Martin laughed. "I heard both." They walked through the building together. Martin explained pricing, supply chains, restaurant equipment, and regional distributors. He spoke quickly, assuming the new owner knew almost nothing. Ethan listened patiently. When Martin accidentally miscalculated projected weekly inventory costs, Ethan quietly corrected the figures without reaching for a calculator. Martin frowned. You did that in your head? I've always been comfortable with numbers. Martin looked at him more carefully. You ever managed restaurants before? For a while. What kind? Ethan simply smiled. Enough to appreciate fresh coffee. Martin chuckled, unaware he had only glimpsed a fraction of the truth. Before leaving, he handed Ethan a glossy invitation. Regional Hospitality Growth Summit. Restaurant owners. Investors. Food suppliers. Corporate executives. The largest networking event in the state. You should come, Martin said. Good place to meet people. Ethan studied the invitation. Maybe this was exactly what the diner needed. 2 days later, sunlight reflected from towering glass walls as Ethan stepped into the downtown convention center. Everything felt polished. Marble floors gleamed beneath enormous crystal chandeliers. Expensive perfume mixed with fresh espresso. Tailored suits moved confidently through crowded hallways filled with laughter and business cards. Ethan wore his cleanest navy blazer. It wasn't fashionable, but it was carefully pressed. Several attendees looked briefly toward him before looking away. To them, he was simply another struggling small business owner hoping to survive. Invisible again. He preferred it that way. Until a familiar voice echoed across the lobby. Ethan Brooks. The word stopped him instantly. Nathan Caldwell descended the grand staircase surrounded by executives, photographers, and conference organizers. Tall. Confident. Perfectly tailored charcoal suit. The effortless smile of a man accustomed to applause. For just one heartbeat, either man spoke. Nathan's smile slowly changed. Recognition became amusement. Well? He looked Ethan up and down. I never thought I'd see you here. Nearby conversation slowed. People sensed history. Nathan extended his arms dramatically. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ethan Brooks. Several guests turned curiously. Nathan laughed. He used to sit in executive meetings convinced he could save companies. A few polite chuckles followed. Nathan continued. And now. He glanced toward Ethan's conference badge. He owns a roadside diner. Laughter grew louder. Someone whispered. Seriously? Nathan smiled wider. I suppose life has a wonderful sense of humor. The words hung in the air. Sharp. Deliberate. Cruel. More people gathered. Phones quietly appeared. Some recognized Nathan. Few recognized Ethan. Exactly as Nathan intended. So tell us, Nathan said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Is this your retirement plan? Another ripple of laughter. You always dreamed too small. The crowd waited. Every eye settled on Ethan. The marble floor reflected brilliant white light beneath his worn shoes. He could feel dozens of strangers measuring his worth without knowing a single truthful thing about him. Old memories stirred. Boardrooms. Headlines. Betrayal. Promises. Loss. For the briefest moment, anger knocked softly against the door of his heart. He didn't answer it. Instead, he adjusted one cuff of his blazer, smoothed an invisible wrinkle, then looked calmly into Nathan's eyes. I hope your speech goes well. Nothing more. No defense. No argument. No bitterness. Only quiet dignity. For a strange second, the lobby fell almost completely silent. Nathan had expected outrage. Excuses? Embarrassment. Instead, Ethan gave him nothing to defeat. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before conversations resumed. Nathan forced another confident smile and turned away toward the ballroom. The crowd followed. But not everyone. Near the back of the lobby, an elderly woman wearing a conference badge continued watching Ethan with unusual curiosity. She didn't laugh. She didn't move. Instead, she whispered almost to herself. I know that face. And somewhere deep inside the convention center archives, locked away in forgotten corporate records, a file bearing Ethan Brooks' name remained exactly where someone had desperately hoped it would never be found. Morning sunlight spilled through the diner's front windows in long golden bands, catching tiny particles of flour suspended in the air as the scent of fresh bread, sizzling bacon, and strong coffee slowly replaced the lingering odor of old paint and cleaning chemicals. Outside, pickup trucks rolled along the two-lane highway, their tires hissing over pavements still damp from the previous night's rain. Inside, the rhythmic clatter of plates blended with quiet conversation, while the old ceiling fan clicked once every rotation, a reminder that some things still needed fixing. 3 weeks earlier, most people had seen a dying roadside diner. Now, every booth was occupied. The transformation had happened so gradually that almost no one noticed until it was impossible to ignore. Ethan Brooks never advertised. He never chased attention. He simply made every decision with quiet precision. The menu remained small because wasted ingredients destroyed struggling restaurants. The coffee was brewed every 20 minutes instead of every hour because customers remembered freshness more than fancy decor. Every employee learned every station, not because it was cheaper, but because understanding someone else's work built respect. Most diners chased profits. Ethan chased consistency. The profits quietly followed. He arrived before sunrise every morning, long before the first delivery truck pulled into the gravel lot. By 6 o'clock, the kitchen lights glowed warmly against the cool blue dawn. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted through the parking lot, often attracting travelers who hadn't planned to stop. They almost always returned. Lily sat in the corner booth after school, doing homework beneath the soft yellow glow of an old hanging lamp. Every so often, she looked toward her father. She noticed everything. The way he thanked every dishwasher by name. The way he carried heavy boxes himself instead of asking someone else. The way he quietly replaced a customer's spilled coffee before they even had time to apologize. "You run this place differently," she said one afternoon. Ethan smiled while polishing glasses. "Different isn't always better. It is here." He looked at her. "Why do you think that?" She shrugged. "People smile when they leave." There wasn't much to add after that. Children often recognized success long before adults measured it. Business continued growing. Word spread through truck drivers, traveling nurses, construction crews, and local families. "There's a little diner off Highway 18. The owner actually remembers your name. The food isn't expensive. It just feels..." People searched for the right word. "Peaceful." That was never accidental. Ethan believed restaurants served more than meals. Sometimes they served second chances. Late Friday afternoon, Martin, the regional supplier, hurried through the entrance carrying a clipboard. His usually cheerful expression had disappeared. "We've got a serious problem." Ethan immediately set down the invoice he had been reviewing. "What happened?" "Our refrigerated truck broke down 40 miles away." Martin rubbed a hand across his forehead. "Half the restaurants in the county won't get deliveries before tomorrow." Several cooks overheard the conversation. One whispered nervously, "The weekend rush." Martin nodded. "Exactly." Phones immediately started ringing across nearby restaurants. Owners complained. Managers panicked. One establishment closed for dinner before sunset. Another began buying frozen food from grocery stores. The anxiety spread faster than the actual shortage. Ethan remained still. "How many trucks?" "1. "How many routes?" 4. Martin blinked. "How did you?" "How many?" 4. Ethan looked across the dining room, his eyes moving almost like someone assembling an invisible blueprint. "What warehouse is holding today's reserve inventory?" Martin frowned. "The North Distribution Center." "Capacity?" "I'm not sure." Ethan continued. "What percentage of today's deliveries are frozen products instead of fresh?" Martin hesitated. Maybe 40%. Ethan nodded slowly. "Not enough." "What?" "You don't need another truck." Martin stared. "You need to reverse the routes." The supplier looked confused. "So instead of one truck trying to complete 4 routes..." Ethan reached for a napkin and borrowed a pen. Within seconds, he sketched 4 intersecting delivery loops. Move frozen inventory to the closest restaurants first. He marked several circles. Transfer fresh inventory to local rental vans. Another set of arrows. Cross-load the remaining orders here. Martin's eyes widened. That would... It cuts your total mileage by nearly 30%. He continued drawing. Restaurant 12 already has extra freezer capacity. Another line. Restaurant 8 can temporarily store dairy. More calculations. Split the labor between both warehouse shifts. Martin looked speechless. The napkin filled with numbers, schedules, loading sequences, and timing estimates. Everything fit together. Perfectly. Employees slowly gathered around the counter. One waitress whispered, "How is he doing that?" No one answered. Because no one knew. Martin finally looked up. This isn't restaurant management. No. What is it? Ethan folded the napkin. Operations. The room grew quiet. Not ordinary quiet. The kind of silence that appears when people suddenly realize they have underestimated someone standing directly in front of them. Even the old ceiling fan seemed louder. Martin carefully unfolded the napkin again. His hands trembled slightly. I've worked logistics for 22 years. He looked back at Ethan. I've never seen anyone solve a distribution collapse this fast. Ethan simply smiled. I've had practice. Nothing more. No explanation. No story. Just another mystery. By evening, Martin called. It worked. Ethan continued washing dishes. I'm glad. We saved every restaurant except one small cafe. Good. You understand. Martin paused. You probably saved over 200 jobs today. Ethan looked through the diner window where Lily laughed with one of the waitresses while helping refill sugar containers. Then it was worth drawing on a napkin. Martin remained silent for several seconds. Finally he asked, Who are you really? Ethan looked toward the sunset glowing orange beyond the highway. I'm exactly who you met. He ended the call. But the question remained. Across the city, 42 floors above the streets below, Nathan Caldwell stood inside the glass-walled executive office overlooking the skyline. A folder rested on his desk. Regional restaurant reports. He almost ignored it. Then one photograph caught his attention. A picture of Ethan's diner. Sales growth, plus 287%. Customer retention, exceptional. Operational efficiency, industry-leading. Nathan's smile disappeared. He flipped through more pages. Supplier feedback. Community reviews. Local news coverage. Every page carried Ethan's name. Impossible. He pressed the intercom. Claire. His assistant answered immediately. Yes, Mr. Caldwell? I want everything. Regarding what? The diner. A pause. The owner? Nathan's eyes narrowed toward the skyline. Ethan Brooks. Another pause. What exactly would you like investigated? Nathan closed the folder. Everything. His voice became colder. Suppliers. Bank loans. Health inspections. Property taxes. Insurance. I don't care what it is. He slowly looked again at the photograph of the little roadside diner. Find me pressure points. Claire hesitated. Is there a problem? Nathan answered without emotion. There will be. The following Monday, breakfast service filled every table. Coffee steamed. Forks clinked gently against ceramic plates. Sunlight warmed the front windows. For the first time in years, the old diner felt alive. Then a black luxury SUV rolled slowly into the parking lot. It remained there. Engine running. Windows dark. No one got out. Ethan noticed it immediately. So did Lily. She looked toward her father. He quietly continued pouring coffee. But deep inside, something old and unwelcome stirred. He had spent years believing the past would eventually stop following him. Instead, it had finally learned his new address. Cold rain struck the diner's wide front windows in uneven bursts, each gust rattling the aging glass while the neon open sign cast a weary red reflection across puddles gathering in the parking lot. Inside, the warmth of fresh soup and baking bread struggled against the chill that slipped through the old door each time another customer entered. Plates clinked softly. Coffee steamed beneath hanging lamps. Yet beneath the familiar comfort, a quiet unease settled over the room like an approaching storm. Ethan Brooks sensed it before anyone spoke a word. He had learned long ago that danger rarely announced itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived wearing a polite smile. The black SUV that had lingered outside the diner the previous morning returned just after lunch. This time, 2 men stepped out. Their navy jackets carried county inspection badges. The younger inspector introduced himself courteously enough. "Routine compliance inspection." Ethan nodded. "You're welcome anywhere." The older inspector looked around with unusually careful eyes, making notes before he had examined a single appliance. Employees exchanged uncertain glances. Lily watched from the corner booth where she was finishing homework, instinctively recognizing the tension that adults tried to hide. For nearly 2 hours the inspectors measured refrigerator temperatures, examined invoices, checked storage shelves, reviewed employee certifications, and photographed nearly everything. Nothing appeared wrong. The kitchen was spotless. Every receipt was organized. Every expiration date had been checked that morning. Still, they kept searching. Finally, the senior inspector closed his clipboard. "We've identified several procedural concerns." Ethan remained calm. "Could you explain them?" "Documentation discrepancies." "Which ones?" "We'll provide a report." The explanation was frustratingly vague. By evening, an official notice arrived. "Pending review. Temporary suspension recommended." 3 words that carried enormous weight. Customers quietly filtered out as rumors spread faster than facts. One whispered that the diner had failed a health inspection. Another claimed food poisoning. By sunset, social media had transformed uncertainty into certainty. Business dropped almost overnight. After locking the front door, Ethan stood alone in the silent dining room. The fluorescent lights reflected across polished tables that no one occupied. Only yesterday every seat had been filled. Now the room felt painfully large. Lily walked from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. She placed one beside him. "You didn't do anything wrong." He smiled faintly. "I know. Then why does everyone believe it?" He looked through the rain-streaked window. "Because fear travels faster than truth." She considered that quietly. "Will the truth catch up?" He looked at his daughter. "It has to." Not because he was certain. Because she needed someone to believe it. The following week became a lesson in quiet endurance. A dairy supplier canceled its contract without explanation. A local bank delayed renewal of Ethan's operating credit. An insurance company requested unexpected audits. Even longtime customers hesitated before entering. One afternoon, Martin arrived carrying an envelope instead of his usual delivery manifest. His face said everything before he spoke. "I'm sorry." Ethan opened the letter. Supplier agreement terminated. Effective immediately. No reason given. Martin lowered his voice. "I wasn't allowed to fight it." "Weren't allowed?" "They said the decision came from corporate." Neither man needed to ask which corporation. Nathan Caldwell's influence stretched farther than Ethan had hoped. "I'm sorry," Martin repeated. Ethan folded the letter neatly. "Thank you for bringing it yourself." Martin looked ashamed. "You saved our company a month ago." "I remember. And this is how they repay you." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't carry someone else's choices." Martin nodded silently before leaving through the front door, unable to meet Ethan's eyes. Late that evening, after Lily had gone upstairs to sleep in the small apartment above the diner, Ethan unlocked a weathered wooden trunk hidden beneath his bed. He hesitated. His hand rested on the brass latch longer than necessary. Inside lay another life. Executive awards. Conference badges. Photographs of board meetings. Articles praising innovative leadership. A leather-bound notebook filled with handwritten operational models. And beneath everything else, one sealed envelope. Its edges had yellowed with age. Across the front, written in careful handwriting, were only 4 words. If the truth matters. Ethan closed his eyes. The envelope had remained unopened for 7 years. Not because he feared what it contained. Because opening it meant breaking a promise. He remembered the hospital room. Machines humming softly. His mentor, Charles Whitmore, struggling to breathe. "They'll blame someone," Charles had whispered. "They always do. I can expose everything," Ethan had answered. Charles had slowly shaken his head. "Not yet. There are innocent people whose lives will be destroyed. Promise me." Reluctantly, Ethan had promised. Within weeks, Nathan Caldwell allowed the blame to settle entirely on Ethan. The company recovered. Nathan's career flourished. Ethan disappeared. He had kept the promise. Even when it cost him everything. Downstairs, someone knocked gently on the diner door. It was nearly midnight. Ethan looked through the glass. An elderly woman stood beneath an umbrella. He recognized her immediately. The same woman who had watched him silently after Nathan humiliated him at the conference. He unlocked the door. "I'm sorry to disturb you. You recognized me," Ethan said. She smiled. "I recognize you first." She introduced herself. "My name is Margaret Ellison." The name landed with unexpected weight. Margaret Ellison had once served on the board of Caldwell Hospitality. "I've been trying to remember where I'd seen you." She looked directly into his eyes. "Then I found an old annual report." Silence settled between them. "You weren't supposed to disappear," she said quietly. "I chose to." "No." Her voice remained gentle. "Someone chose for you." Ethan said nothing. Margaret reached into her handbag and removed a thin folder. "I retired before everything happened." She placed it carefully on the counter. "But I never believed the official story." "What is this?" "Copies." "Copies of what?" "Board correspondence." His heartbeat slowed. "Read them. I think you'll discover you weren't the only person who kept records." She turned toward the door. "Ethan." He looked up. "How much longer are you willing to let someone else write the story of your life?" Without waiting for an answer, she disappeared into the rain. Hours later, Ethan sat alone beneath the dim kitchen lights. The diner was silent except for the ticking wall clock. The folder lay beside the unopened envelope from Charles Whitmore. One contained the past. The other might determine the future. Upstairs, Lily slept peacefully, unaware that everything her father had sacrificed to protect was balanced on the edge of a single decision. For 7 years he had carried the weight of silence because he believed it protected others. Now that same silence threatened to destroy the only home he and his daughter had managed to build. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky. Inside, Ethan finally reached toward the unopened envelope. His fingers rested on the seal. And for the first time in 7 years, he was no longer certain that keeping his promise was the right thing to do. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of the County Civic Auditorium, turning the polished oak floor into bands of warm gold that contrasted sharply with the tension gathering inside. Television cameras stood in neat rows along the back wall. Reporters whispered into microphones. Executives in tailored suits occupied the front seats while restaurant owners, suppliers, and local residents filled every remaining chair. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee, paper, and polished wood. Every quiet conversation seemed to stop the moment Ethan Brooks walked through the doors. He wore the same navy blazer he had worn to the hospitality conference weeks earlier. It still wasn't expensive. It was simply clean. Lily walked beside him, her hand resting lightly against his arm. She looked at the crowd, then up at her father. "Nervous?" He smiled. "A little. You always told me courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding that something else matters more." She nodded. "Then let's tell the truth." At the front of the room, Nathan Caldwell appeared every bit the confident executive. His tailored charcoal suit was immaculate. His smile was practiced. His posture suggested complete control. He believed this hearing would become another opportunity to dismiss rumors before returning to business as usual. He hadn't expected Ethan to appear. And he certainly hadn't expected Margaret Ellison. The retired board member entered quietly, carrying a leather portfolio. Behind her came Martin. Then another former executive. Then another. Nathan's expression changed almost imperceptibly. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain. The hearing began with routine statements. Financial reports. Operational summaries. Corporate assurances. Nathan spoke smoothly. Our organization has always maintained the highest standards of integrity. Several audience members nodded. Then the chairperson turned toward Ethan. Mr. Brooks, you've requested permission to present evidence relating to both your previous dismissal and recent actions affecting your business. I have. You may proceed. The room became still. Ethan placed 2 items on the table. A weathered envelope. And Margaret's folder. I have no interest in revenge, he began calmly. I only want the truth to stand where silence once stood. There was no anger in his voice. Only quiet conviction. He opened the envelope Charles Whitmore had asked him never to use unless the truth became necessary. Inside were handwritten memoranda. Original planning documents. Internal emails. Signed recommendations. Every page told the same story. The disastrous corporate decision had never been Ethan's. He had argued against it repeatedly. Nathan had approved it anyway. When the decision failed, Ethan accepted public blame to protect hundreds of employees from immediate layoffs while believing the full truth would eventually emerge. It never had. Until now. Margaret then opened her own file. The board correspondence confirms these documents. She looked directly at the committee. Several directors questioned the official explanation at the time. One by one, additional witnesses spoke. A former compliance officer. A retired financial controller. Martin testified about the recent supplier pressure placed on Ethan's diner. Each statement fit another piece into the same picture. Not speculation. Not rumor. Evidence. Nathan finally stood. This proves nothing. His voice remained confident, but the certainty had faded. These documents are incomplete. Ethan looked at him quietly. They were. He reached into his briefcase once more. I asked the company's digital archives to preserve every operational record before I left. He handed a certified archive report to the committee. The missing records were recovered last week. Nathan's face lost its color. The report contained electronic approvals. Timestamps. Executive authorizations. Every critical decision pointed upward. Not downward. Toward him. The room fell silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of uncertainty. The heavy silence that arrives when denial has nowhere left to stand. Even the reporters stopped typing. No one wanted to interrupt the moment truth finally became undeniable. The committee recessed briefly before returning. Its findings were concise. The evidence demonstrated that Ethan Brooks had been wrongfully blamed years earlier. Recent actions targeting his diner showed a pattern of improper corporate influence. An independent investigation into Nathan Caldwell's conduct would begin immediately. Nathan was removed from executive authority pending the outcome. No applause followed. Justice did not need celebration. It needed recognition. Nathan slowly gathered his belongings. He looked toward Ethan. I built everything. Ethan answered quietly. No. You built a reputation. There is a difference. Nathan lowered his eyes. For perhaps the first time in his career, titles could no longer protect him from consequences. He walked out of the auditorium alone. Outside, the afternoon breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass across the courthouse square. Reporters surrounded Ethan. How does it feel to finally clear your name? Are you planning legal action? Will you return to corporate leadership? Ethan considered each question before answering. I didn't come here to reclaim a position. He glanced toward Lily. I came here to reclaim the truth. And now? I'm going home. Weeks later, the little roadside diner was busier than ever. Not because of newspaper headlines. Not because of television interviews. People came because the food was good. Because the coffee was fresh. Because someone remembered their name when they walked through the door. A small framed newspaper clipping hung near the entrance, not at Ethan's request, but at Lily's. Its headline read, "Local diner owner exonerated after years of silence." Beneath it, she had handwritten a single sentence. "Dad always said the truth doesn't need to shout." Ethan smiled every time he saw it. He had received offers to lead national restaurant chains. Consulting firms promised wealth. Corporate boards invited him back. He declined them all. Instead, he expanded the diner. He hired young people who needed a first chance, veterans searching for a new beginning, and parents rebuilding their lives after hardship. Every employee learned the same lesson on their first day. Respect people before you evaluate them. It became the diner's only unwritten rule. One quiet evening, after the last customer had left, Ethan and Lily sat together in their favorite booth. The neon sign reflected softly against the window. The old ceiling fan still clicked once every rotation. Some things, Ethan decided, didn't need fixing. They reminded people how far they had come. Lily looked around the full dining room. "We really started over." Ethan smiled. "No." He gently wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "We finally started honestly." Outside, another traveler pulled into the parking lot, drawn only by a warm light shining through old windows. Inside, a father who had once been invisible welcomed a stranger with the same quiet kindness that had carried him through every humiliation. Because he understood something many powerful people never learn. A person's greatest worth is rarely measured by the title they hold, but by the dignity they keep when no one believes they have any at all.